The portal is officially popping. Let's talk about what it all means for Missouri right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters. I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And on today's program, I'm going to discuss if maybe Missouri hired the wrong chip or maybe we need double chips. Do we ever think of that possibility? Also, what do the Tigers have returning for 2026? We got Josiah Trotter departing, a whole bunch of news to get into, leading into the transfer portal, of course. But you know what? Real quickly, before I start the program, I do want to remind you today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And yes, let the portal madness begin, everybody. Officially, well, I suppose within the past 12 hours or so, about midnight, the portal is officially open, and Missouri announced that Matt Zollers is officially returning. This according to Missouri's social media. So certainly Zollers is going to be on the roster next season. Will he be the starter for Missouri? That's the question. I think it's quite obvious at this point that Missouri will, at the very least, bring in a prominent quarterback to come in and compete with Zollers. Probably somebody they think is going to win the job, quite honestly. But hey, if Zollers, if he keeps advancing and wins the job outright in fall camp, during spring, that type of deal, I don't think any Missouri fans or anybody on the staff is going to complain. As I've said numerous times, though, I just think if you're Missouri, how can you just completely trust Zollers? I hope he goes and balls out next year. I just don't think it's something you can 100% trust. I'll tell you this, one thing you could trust this past season for Missouri was the second level of the defense. Missouri had some really good linebackers, especially Josiah Trotter, who is officially going to the NFL. And I totally get it. He's a guy who his father, Jeremiah Trotter, his brother, both played in the NFL. I mean, he's the type of player that just seemed inevitable that he was going to be playing pro football one day. So I totally get the decision. I wish him well. And I'll say this, hey, it's Nick Rodriguez time. And Rodriguez was really, really impressive in the Gator Bowl. And by the way, at other moments of this season, he's a somewhat of an undersized linebacker. But in this day and age, maybe that's not such a bad thing. Maybe that makes him a little better in pass coverage. Let's put it that way. Able to cover the tight ends and the running backs, that type of thing. But hey, just in terms of pure run stuffing ability, it's going to be tough to do any better than Josiah Trotter. But hey, Nick Rodriguez he's an interesting piece, no doubt about that. And certainly, I think there's a good chance Missouri will go into the portal for another linebacker or two. But if it were me, that is not a position I would prioritize. Quite honestly, I would hope one of my younger players, whether it's a Dayton Hopkins, somebody like that, Jeremiah Beasley perhaps, I'd like to see somebody who's currently on the roster make their way up through the depth chart and be that second linebacker along with Nick Rodriguez. Because to me, Missouri has so many premium positions other than quarterback, by the way, at which they have to spend. We're talking receiver, corner, offensive line, perhaps even defensive line on the interior as well. Even pass rusher, possibly. I just think if you're Missouri, I don't think you can afford to spend a lot of your resources on the linebacker position. It's a spot where Missouri's done pretty well in developing guys, I would say, for the most part. I just think you almost have to take a chance there and say, hey, our number two linebacker needs to be somebody on this roster right now, especially when you're paying more than decent money at the running back position. Hey, if you follow the NFL, the conventional wisdom is, hey, go cheap on running back. Well, Missouri not going cheap at running back, not just one running back, but two running backs. Jamal Roberts could not have been cheap to retain for Missouri. Drinkwitz was basically openly pining and campaigning for Roberts to return for 2026. And it seems like he got his wish. And just as an emotional fan of Missouri football, a guy who's become attached to Jamal Roberts, He's a St. Louis guy. I love that he's coming back as a fan. I do have to wonder, though, is that a good use of Missouri's resources to spend money on a second running back? I don't know, to be honest with you. I'm just telling you, again, as a fan, as somebody who's enjoyed Jamal Roberts here, I'm glad he's back. And if you're Missouri, maybe you need 2 running backs. As much as Eli Drinkwitz and the Tigers like to run the football, you're going to be breaking in yet another new starting quarterback next season, more than likely, or an fairly inexperienced one in Zollers. It's like the Tigers are still going to be a run-heavy type of team. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. I don't mind running the football. What I don't mind is being completely ineffective in the passing game. That's all. Missouri doesn't have to lead the nation in passing yards. They don't have to suddenly become the run and shoot or an air raid or anything like that. But when it's 3rd and 8, when it's 3rd and 10, they need to have a chance. It can't just be, well, we're going to run a quarterback draw again and hope for luck. Just enough with that. That just cannot be the future for Missouri in the passing game. It really is as simple as that. And by the way, a bunch of other names for Missouri, I'm just going to fire them off at you here quickly. A whole bunch of names have entered the transfer portal here. Johnny Williams, former offensive tackle for West Virginia. He was a backup last season, didn't play very much. Another backup lineman, Javen Richardson, by the way, who filled in admirably, I thought, at tackle in the South Carolina game for Caden Green this past season. Well, he's entering the portal as well. Also, Brandon Solis, another lineman, Justin Bodford, defensive lineman, Tavoris Jones, a longtime backup running back, former 4-star recruit out of Texas back in the day, offensive lineman Jalen Early, defensive end Nate Johnson. Also, one more name there. Let's see, Robbie Meyer also entering the portal, the former Missouri kicker. CJ Bass, one of the more disappointing names, I would say, by the way. A kid from East St. Louis, a safety, a highly ranked recruit, that type of deal. You just would hope that some of these guys would actually stick around if they don't play for their true freshman season. That just does not feel like it's the case anymore in college football. Basically, hey, if you're not playing as a true freshman, well, production over potential, as Drinkwitz likes to say, and it just feels like everybody is too impatient to stick around and see if they can pay off their potential. And by the way, I mean that both ways, from the coach's perspective of impatience and the player's perspective from impatience. I think it obviously goes both ways. But for somebody like CJ Bass, I would say even more so for somebody like Henry Fanuku, an offensive lineman with a lot of physical talent, but not a lot of polish yet. And as an offensive lineman, I think it's pretty unrealistic to 99% of them don't play as true freshmen, at least not in a significant way. So for somebody like Fanuku, I would ask him, honestly, what do you want out of this? What's your plan? Do you want to make the NFL? Because are you just trying to make short-term gains in college? Because I genuinely would just would want to know what his goals are. Because if you're going to develop as a player, you got to stay someplace for more than a year, over a 4-year period. Call me crazy. I'm sure there are examples of guys who have played 4 schools in 4 years and have done okay in the NFL. Don't get me wrong. I just think that even those versions of those guys would have been better had they stuck around and developed somewhere for some period of time. And I will say this, Josh Manning, so far, among all those guys I've just listed, all the guys we've listed in previous podcasts, really, other than Josh Manning and Marquise Johnson, I'm not really all that horrified or disappointed by any of these departures. Manning was a guy I felt like, well, he had really probably his best season at Missouri. I was about to say breakout. That may be going a little far. Maybe this season will be Josh Manning's breakout year, but unfortunately, it's going to be in a different uniform than with Missouri. And speaking of different uniforms, ironically, Marquise Johnson sounds like he's talking to Kentucky. And ironically, of course, because Johnson, well, had that famous fake punt against the Wildcats in 2023. But we've talked about who's leaving for Missouri quite a bit so far in the program. Who's coming back? Because that's obviously as important of a factor as anything. So let's get into that as the show goes along here. But you know what? First, we got to talk about Rougiette, because this is something most men don't want to talk about. Stress from money, work, just life in general. Well, that switch doesn't flip off at night, and it can show up at the worst time. Well, that's why Rougiette Ready is designed to help you take control back. Rougiette Ready is a next-generation prescription treatment created to support both the brain and the body so you can feel present, confident, and ready when the moment matters. So if you've been looking to take the next step, now is the time. Head to Rougiette.com/LockedOnCollege. That is RUGIET.com/LockedOnCollege to get 15% off your first order for a limited time. Rougiette Ready. Feel present, feel confident, feel ready. So, of course, I've talked about who is leaving. How about who is coming back for Missouri? Well, obviously, this is an important topic. And as I previously mentioned, Ahmad Hardy and Jamal Roberts are coming back next season. And while Missouri has a bunch of offensive linemen they're going to have to replace, I'm anticipating another strong rushing attack for the Tigers. I think we all anticipate that. And by the way, it wasn't as though the Missouri offensive line dominated in the rushing game this fall. So just keep all of that in mind. Certainly appears that Caden Green is coming back next season. He was a preseason All-American in some circles at the left guard position before being kicked out to left tackle with about 2-3 weeks to go before the first game. Obviously, at the time, that didn't seem like a good sign. In retrospect, it was obviously not an ideal situation for Missouri. Curtis Piegler will be returning at guard as well. So again, it'll just be interesting to see what Missouri does in the portal. I think if you're Missouri, be flexible here. Caden Green allows you to be a little bit flexible in the portal at lineman. So obviously, I think in an ideal world, Green would move back to left guard. You'd get a great left tackle in the portal. But again, as I was talking about with Jamal Roberts in the previous segment, of course, price means a whole lot. If not everything, certainly it's an enormous factor. So typically speaking, tackles are going to be more expensive than interior linemen. So maybe the move is to keep Caden Green at tackle and shore up the guard positions, the center position for Missouri, with Connor Tollison exhausting his eligibility. Obviously, Donovan Olubade is back next season. That's a big deal. He was really impressive for a true freshman. I got to think, man, as a sophomore, that route tree is just going to continue to expand. Can't wait to see what his career looks like as a Tiger these next at least couple years here. You got to hope. Also, the tight end position, Missouri losing absolutely nothing there. Brett Norfleet, Jordan Harris, Jude James back too, of course. By the way, Norfleet, it's real simple with them. Just got to stay healthy. Hopefully I think he's getting surgery on that shoulder. Hopefully that'll fix what's been ailing him. We've got to hope that. Speaking of injuries, by the way, hey, Blake Craig should be back next season, 1 year removed from his ACL injury. I'd have to say, as I've talked about on this program before, it's very important to be 2 years away from your ACL tear. Yes, you can return after 1 year, but you may not return to fully 100% effectiveness that first year. I'd have to look into that with kickers. See, when I talk about that, I'm talking, guys who tackle and run the football, that type of deal. But kickers, it's a little bit different of a thing, isn't it? Could be easier, could be worse, quite honestly. I'm really not sure. And well, you know what? Off the top of my head, I'm not even sure if Blake Craig, to be brutally honest with you, was it his right leg or was it his left leg? And by the way, which would be better? Obviously, you're kicking with the right leg, but planning with that left leg takes some force and some strength there as well. So regardless, Blake Craig, even if he's not 100% of himself in 2026, 80% of him will be better than what Missouri had at place kicker this past season, to be, again, completely brutally honest with all of you. By the way, speaking of guys who are removed, well, a couple years now in 2026 anyway, removed from an ACL tear, how about Darius Smith? He's a guy I'm really interested in because a lot of hype with him in 24 for Missouri coming into that season. Well, he blew his ACL out in fall camp in August, unfortunately. Missed the 24 season. Well, in 25, Smith was a backup behind a couple really good players in Zion Young and Damon Wilson, a couple NFL quality players, in my opinion. Well, Smith had his moments, though. And especially against Vanderbilt, I thought he was a real key in keeping Diego Pavia's running game, especially on key downs, keeping him in check. I thought Smith was really good there. So I think another year removed from that ACL tear for Smith, I could see him having a breakout season in 2026 and maybe replacing a decent amount of that production from either Wilson or Young. And by the way, speaking of pass rushers, another backup, Langdon Kitchen, a guy from West Strand, Missouri, Northwest Missouri State formerly, the type of guy you bring him in, you think, okay, he might be a solid player, that type of deal. He certainly wasn't a superstar last year for Missouri in 2025. But you know what? In 2022, a similar profile player at a different position named Cody Schrader was solid in 2022 as well before really breaking out, obviously, for his huge 2023 season. Now, I'm not trying to tell you that Kitchen is going to be a Heisman Trophy candidate or anything like that. That would be a little silly. What I am telling you is I saw enough from Kitchen last season that I think with another offseason, more playing time for him this year, I'm just interested to see what he has because I think there's more there than what I think a lot of Missouri fans realize. Again, Smith and Kitchen, a couple of guys who played behind two really good players. Maybe Missouri should just stand pat at pass rusher and maybe focus on the interior part of the defensive line. Certainly an argument to be made there. Oh, and since I brought up interior defensive lineman, Marquise Graciel is going to be coming back next season as well. And perhaps maybe he's ready for more action next season too. Although the way Missouri likes to rotate their interior defensive linemen, I certainly anticipate at least, one or two additions there. They're not going to play anybody 50 to 60 snaps at that position. That just simply doesn't seem like that's in the cards for any Tiger interior defensive lineman. But if you're Missouri, I just would be asking myself, how am I going to spend this money? Because to me, I think the number one goal if you're Missouri, I think you got to be flexible. I think you got to take the market as it comes. Of course, we can't totally anticipate how the market's going to play out at all these different positions. Certain positions will be getting more than what they expected. Others will be getting less than what they expected. And a lot of that will come down to timing too. And speaking of timing, really, I probably should have said this number one, to be honest with you, but Missouri has to figure out the quarterback position early, like today. Or at least in by the end of this weekend, that type of deal. Missouri should have a pretty good idea what they're doing at the quarterback position, whether that is going after one of the big names in the portal, sticking with Zollers and, going with a more competitive backup type of scenario. I think clearly, though, Missouri is going to look for a starter potentially. It's just the question is, what type of starter are you going to look for? One of the guys at the very top of the market, like the oh gosh, now I'm blanking on his name. Excuse me. The kid from Cincinnati, Sorley, forget it, whatever. The guys at the very top of the quarterback market, or maybe somebody like Dylan Raiola for Nebraska. And by the way, I had the network produced and put out a short for me on YouTube recently about Raiola that said Missouri should pursue him. I didn't exactly say that. I was saying I'm kind of more interested than I thought I would be, was mainly the point I was trying to make there. But by the way, Missouri obviously hired Chip Lindsey to be their next offensive coordinator. That was really interesting that Chip Kelly ended up signing with Northwestern to be their next offensive coordinator. So that had a lot of Missouri fans wondering, did Missouri actually get the wrong Chip there? Well, you know what? I have a little bit different of a perspective, and I'm going to offer it to you coming up here in just a little bit. But you know what? We're going to talk about our Fridays because it's Friday right now, and Fridays feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better every Friday night. Before tip-off, FanDuel is giving fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited-time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app right before the action starts. So on Fridays, from 6 to 7:30 Eastern, they become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. Opening the FanDuel app during Happy Hour always brings something new. We're talking boosts, bonuses, and some surprises. So before tip-off, check out the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 Eastern Time. Of course, that's 5 to 6:30 Central. A little basketball, a little action, a whole lot of Friday energy. That is NBA Happy Hour, only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. And for you everydayers out there, as you're well aware of, Missouri had a ton of money it could have spent on an offensive coordinator and just assistant coaches this past offseason. So I will say this. One of my first reactions when I saw that Northwestern hired Chip Kelly is I thought, if Missouri and Eli Drinkwitz wanted Chip Kelly, they probably could have had him. So was that a mistake? But you know what? My thought was, did Missouri get the wrong Chip? That type of deal. Well, my thought was, if Missouri had so much money to spend, I would have actually considered getting both Chips. In other words, hey, let Chip Kelly call the plays. Maybe let Chip Lindsey be the quarterback coach and develop the guys, develop the quarterbacks, which is apparently his calling card and much more. Well, Chip Kelly's calling card is much more X's and O's, I would say. So that may have been a good combination there. I'm just saying. I don't know how realistic that necessarily was, but I will say this for people who think, obviously Chip Kelly's a massive, massive name. But for people who think he would have been a complete home run, I would question that as well, because frankly, Chip Kelly had an incredible run at Oregon. There's no doubt about that, but it took a long, long time. In fact, more than another 10 years or so, I would say, for Chip Kelly to actually be a successful coach anywhere. His 3 years with the Philadelphia Eagles obviously ended poorly after a fast start with Michael Vick and company. But then 1 year with the San Francisco 49ers, he goes 2-14 and gets fired. Then with UCLA, a run that was, mediocre at best, I would say, from 2018 to 2013. Finally, Chip Kelly, hits a home run again in 2024 as the offensive coordinator with the Ohio State national champion Buckeyes that season. But hey, in 2025, Chip went to the Raiders and got fired again already after just one season. So I don't think Chip Kelly is an obvious home run hire for Northwestern or Missouri or anybody else for that matter. I would have certainly been excited about it if the Tigers would have hired him. But I'll just say, again, to my idea, if I could have spent a whole bunch of money and it was all earmarked for assistant coaches, I would have considered maybe getting both of them. That would have just been my thought. And if you think that's totally unrealistic, maybe it is. But I will say this from our buddy Stephen Willis, who, oh God, he's got to be so obnoxious right now after that Ole Miss win over Georgia, doesn't he? But seriously, my buddy Stephen was telling me that Chip Lindsey was all set to be the tight end coach at Ole Miss next season before Missouri and Eli Drinkwitz swooped in with a better offer. So I don't think him being the quarterback coach at Missouri was completely off the table. The question is it actually worth it to get Chip Kelly in 2026? I'm not so sure. I think he's a really high upside play, but also the downside is very, very obvious too. So really, I think it's a pretty great fit with Northwestern the more I think about it, because I guess the Wildcats, the Northwestern Wildcats, that is, are looking at Vanderbilt, for instance, and thinking, wait a minute, if the Vandy can win in the SEC, why can't we win, again, in a similar type city, Nashville versus Chicago? Why can't we win at Northwestern? Evanston, obviously, but you get the point, Chicagoland people. But hey, hopefully you've gotten the point here today on Locked On Mizzou. And by the way, if you want more of me, you got to check out the Everydayer Club. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/everydayer. For just $5 a month or $50 a year, you can get this show ad-free and also access to our Locked On Discord, that server, and more. So if you're interested, check it out, lockedonpodcast.com/everyday, or just click the link in the description of this podcast. So you know what? Appreciate you joining me today. And until next time, I am John Miller. Got lots of portal stuff to get to, and you'll have all the best opinions for it right here on Locked On Mizzou.